way you guys look up Google now, and you see like, you read like, say like his date of birth, where he came from, whatever, they would give you a vertical file with all this information. And it was a way of, a newcomer who's doing research could do research without having to be overwhelmed with all the choices that you have. Because sometimes as a researcher, you know, you're trying to figure out how to basically manage people's time. And not to have to go so you know, so it would be gross to give an 11-year-old kid a book on James Baldwin. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't, I wouldn't be able to read it, but I could be able to get these tiny little bits of information.
It's like Wikipedia.
Like Wikipedia, exactly. Like, that's what I'm saying, like Wikipedia. But it was in a file. You know what I'm saying? They hand it to you, you open it up, newspaper clippings, Port of Times, dates, biographies, bibliographies, all within that one file. And everything you need it, and then you can be able to actually put that thing and write the report. I got an A in a report. My first time at the Schomburg. And that was right across the street from 135th Street YMCA, where I learned how to swim. And you know, and I remember that because the guy, I was holding on to I was in 3 feet of water. I was holding on, and I was a tall kid. The guy just came up to me, he's tapping me, so he's like, first lesson, stand up. And I stood up. He was like, now, do you think you're gonna drown? And I was like, nah, I'm fine. That's like it. Ever since that time, I've been swimming, back and forth. That was right there across the street where I went to do my gym lesson and stuff like that. And that was all within that. So, and then around the corner, movie-wise, 125th Street is where they took us to see movies when I was a kid at the YMCA at summer camp. The counselors went to see what they wanted to see. They wanted to see RoboCop. That's not appropriate movie for a 10-year-old to watch. But it is what it is. But it was a great time. It was 1986. But I'm just starting there because I just, you know, this class is about geography, place. You reminded me on 35th Street, some of the places. Right across the street from Schomburg, when I got a little older, there was a restaurant there called Pan Pans. And that's where I used to eat at after have a nice day of research at the Schomburg. Go eat a champagne, go eat a Pan Pans, or go to Wells, original chicken and waffles. Y'all know that Pan Pans because there's a meme going around with Mos Def and Alicia Keys, and Mos Def orders milk and codfish or something like that, something gross. That's Pan Pans. That's where the video was shot. Pan Pans. Right across the street. Now it's a big hole. There's nothing there no more. But that's what it used to do. It used to be like a diner style. Same way with M&G's. When I lived on 127th Street in St. Nick. Diner style. You go there, you go there, get it in, get your food to go. But yeah, that's all it was, 125th Street. That's all I was growing up. All along 155th Street, where I grew up, 8th Avenue. That's where I grew up. At the end, just as 8th Avenue is ending, you go into Harlem River Drive, you're going up to Washington Heights. So that was where I was at, the end of Black Harlem, the beginning of the Heights, over at Edgecombe Avenue, where the old Giant Stadium used to be. And that's where I was born. I'm the youngest of 3 children. My mom and dad came here from Charleston, South Carolina in 1960. 1961, my mom came here first. My dad was a football player, Bethune-Cookman. He came back, which is in Daytona Beach. He took a bus from Daytona Beach to Charleston to look for my mom. Went to my grandmother's house. My grandmother was like, she's gone. So my dad was like, where did she go? She went to New York by herself. Following week, my dad left. Went to New York to look for my mom. And he stayed. And then he called my uncle. My dad found a job at the South Carolina, down on the Jersey Shore. And he was making a ridiculous amount of money, but it was like $75 a week plus tips. And he called my uncle, and 3 days later, my uncle came. And that was it, and they stayed at SROs uptown. And then my mom and dad got married. They live on Sherman Avenue.
You want to explain what an SRO is?
You guys don't know what SRO is? Single room occupancy. See, back in those days, right? If you were a single man, you stayed at a boarding house, or you stayed at somebody's like place, and it was a single room. It was like a hotel, and you would have to share a hot plate in the kitchen or something like that, or share a bathroom with somebody. We got something on back, get your own bedroom. Same thing with women, right? Really,
like a boarding house.
Yeah, like a boarding house. Really, single bedrooms are really a luxury, and that was actually the gay people did that. Because I'm telling you the truth. I'm just saying, I'm telling you the truth. The gay folks did do that because the gay folks, because if you want to be gay in the city, you had to, you don't want nobody to know your business. You had to be single in your own bedroom. You know what I'm saying? And you want to have sex or whatever. So that's how you become sexual liberated. So that's why Audre Lorde and Zombies talk about, I lived in a single bedroom. But most people who came up from down south, they worked during the day and then lived in a single room occupancy. Same thing with these African immigrants right now. They might be even sharing a bed. You know what I'm saying? They don't have their own apartment. So it's nothing new about so these things go on and on and on. You know what I'm saying? In terms of spatiality, how things are going. And when you got a family, you got married, or you decided to do that, you moved into an apartment, which my parents did. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I'm saying. The sexual liberation movement, women's liberation, I shouldn't say this gay. Women, gay folks, they pretty much, I think they pretty much invented the single room bedroom apartment. You know what I'm saying? Because you want your privacy. And that's how you get it. You know what I'm saying? Now you're moving forward. My parents live on Sherman and McKinley, and they like 1965. They're in the South Bronx. They're over by the concourse, which at that time was like kind of like lower middle class. My dad's working in garment. My mom's working at Rockefeller Center as a domestic. And my sister's born pretty much 4 years later. My brother's born. My mom's taking a stroll through George Kilmer Park, which is overlooking Yankee Stadium, overlooking the Mahooms Bridge, overlooking Black Harlem, and she sees that there's a building being built, and that's the Polo Grounds. They demolished the stadium. They started to build the Polo Grounds. My mom goes to get its application. They get in. They're one of the first families to go into the Polo Grounds.
Can you explain what the Polo Grounds is for folks?
You want me to explain what the Polo Grounds is for folks? Okay.
Just very briefly.
Okay, I'll tell you what the Polo Grounds is. So the Polo Grounds was where, at that time, the New York baseball giants and the New York football giants played sports. It was a stadium, right? It was a stadium, and it was shaped like a toilet bowl. You know what I'm saying? It had this really deep center field, and if anyone knows baseball, that's where Willie Mays made that iconic catch in center field some years ago. Rest in peace, Willie Mays. And so that was a place where a lot of the black, where there a lot of like the we call athletes were like being famous. And so the Jets played there, the Giants played there, and so New York had like 3 different stadiums actually. You had Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, you had Yankee Stadium, and then you had the Polo Grounds. Back in those days, they tore down stadiums to build housing. So they knocked down when the Dodgers went to Los Angeles, they knocked that down and turned that into public housing. And when they knocked down Polo Grounds, they turned that into public housing. You know what I'm saying? Now they turn their housing into big stadiums. That's how progressive society is now. But at that time, that was great because that was for my mom and dad. They were living in a 5-floor walk-up, and having elevators was modern. You know what I'm saying? And having a kitchenette and having a laundry room downstairs and having all this stuff was fairly modern. And they got to live in Harlem, where they were hanging out with anyway because they were young. And this was the place to be. You know what I'm saying? You wanted to be in Harlem. You wanted to be where the action was at. You know what I'm saying? All their young friends were hanging out in Harlem. They were just like, so they had an opportunity to do that. And everyone who moved into Polo Grounds at that time, the migration is still going on. Well, it's a great migration, which my parents were part of. They fell into people who they already knew, and they found the people they trusted. and people that could be able to take care of their kids when they went back to work. And that's what happened. So, like, you know, and so that's how, you know, that's how it is. So, 1977, I'm 1 year old. July 13th, 1977, I'm 1 year old. Typical schedule. My brother and sister would come home from school from themselves, go upstairs, get a snack. My dad worked nights at the post office. They get a snack. My mom would pick me up to give my dad extra time to get some extra sleep. She would meet my sitter down by on the polo grounds, right by the subway station, right by the benches, and they would end up kikiing it for a while, talking, and they'd take me upstairs. And then, you know, my dad was the one who cooked dinner for us, right? She cooked dinner for my family, cooked dinner for my husband, for his wife. They were tag team. My dad was a savory cook, my mom was a pastry cook. My dad did dinner, my mom did desserts. Every day was a team, right? That night, the lights went out. You know, kicking it too long, summer night, got carried away, right? When I tell you, I had this big disco, 70s disco baby stroller, dinghy, whatever, 17 flights of stairs. You know what I'm saying? A group of black women helped my mother, 8 of them, carry me up those stairs. You know what I'm saying? In the dark. You know what I'm saying? In the carriage. That was the community that I grew up in. You know what I'm saying? And those are people who became my sitters. Those are people who watched out for me in the avenue. And that was you know, it was a small southern village going on. It still is. But I'll take some questions. But this is the last thing I will tell you. That I didn't even prepare this, whatever. I'll just tell you this much. Whatever. And I'll talk about you to ask me about my history, politics, whatever. But I'll tell you this: Malcolm X Boulevard is very important because what Malcolm X Boulevard is important is because, you know, it's important to note that Malcolm X, and this is recent too. Malcolm X Boulevard, I think they named this sign in 1985, 1986, or something like that. This is Percy Sutton, Basil Patterson, David Dinkins, the big three, right? They named this community. They wanted to make sure that whatever happens in this community, we will never forget the giants who walked this community, the people who came before us. You know what I'm saying? Naming things is political. But Malcolm X is very important for Lenox Avenue because Lenox Avenue is a place of commerce. And one thing I'll tell you about Malcolm, you have to remember this: Malcolm never lived in Harlem. Malcolm commuted to Harlem. And Malcolm saw Harlem as his job. And he saw black people as his business. And so far as he saw black people as his business, he had to interact with Lenox Avenue because Lenox Avenue was where the business was. And as much as we read about Malcolm X's transformation, that sense of being a businessman and being a hustler and being into commerce and commerce being connected to communication never stopped with him. And so that's why he became as big as he was. Because a lot of times when people get radicalized, they run away from the commerce. They go do something else. Like, I'm going over to a forest and start something else. No, he was immersed in the commerce. Because to be immersed in the commerce was meaning that, for example, at that time, when you were growing up, everyone had their own bar. This is an example. Everyone had their own bar. The South Carolinas had their own bar, the Virginians had their own bar, the Georgians had their own bar. The bar they had over here was the one called Andrews, which is not too far from the bar over here, which is I think it's called I forgot the name of it. I just
Londell's?
Not Londell's. The other one, I'm gonna know the name of it in a second, but it's the Baron. Not too far from the Baron, where Revolution Books is right now. But right next door to that bar was a place called Andrews, and Andrews was the South Carolina bar, and that's where, if you were South Carolina, you hung out there, and you got information. I have letters from my grandmother writing my dad saying she can't wait to come up to hang out in Andrews. Because Andrews, even in South Carolina and Charleston, was well known. My dad had a hustle. Everyone had a hustle back then, but his hustle was, he worked in the garment industry. He hustled blouses. So he got blouses on the back of the truck. He would get the women to go into the bar, wear the blouses around Christmas time. And the people would be like, oh, that's a nice blouse. What you got? Is it a girl, you know? Come back to the back of the bar, sell them blouses at 50% off. You know what I'm saying? Make a little Christmas money for the kids. That type of hustle, right, happens in the bars. Malcolm was never afraid of going to those bars and listening. What was going on in the street? Different intellectuals. And that's why he was respected by so many intellectuals. Black nationalists, Marxists, Democratic Socialists, Social Democrats, you know what I'm saying, Christians, because he was able to listen and understand what was the chatter on the streets, because he never went away from those bars and from those places of commerce. And so we're walking around this neighborhood today, this beautiful day on September, and it's still summertime. Summertime until September 23rd. Don't let the bourgeois media take away your summer. You know what I'm saying? Don't let them bourgeois people take away your summer. They always say, oh, it's over on Labor Day. No. Summertime ends September 23rd. You know what I'm saying? I'll be wearing hot pants and pink shorts until that time. I only wore these because I didn't want to balance my intern. And I was like my archival assistant. You know what I'm saying? The less I pay her, the more elaborate or tighter it becomes. I'm sorry, that's an inside. She's really, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, huh? Yeah, exactly. But it's just, what I'm saying to say is that, and this is just me just going off on no notes or whatever. I don't know if you want me to lead or anything like that. I got your questions or whatever. But I'm saying that that's what we need in terms of leadership now. You know what I'm saying? We don't need people to be code switching. We need people to be polyphonic. And to be polyphonic, it means you have to be in the rhythm of your people. And I'm playing off of what you're talking about. What's your name? Edsel. I love that name. You know what I'm saying? I need to know what Edsel's saying. I'm playing off of what he's saying. And that's a conversation. And then I'm playing off of what you're saying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, both of you. You know what I'm saying? And that's how you get a quartet going on. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And it's not free jazz. It's not doing what we want to do. But as I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm responding in my way to your rhythm. And that's what leadership is. And that's what Lenox Avenue is. And so I think it's apropos they call it Malcolm X. I never understood why they call it 5th Avenue, Frederick Douglass Boulevard. But I understand why they call it 5th Avenue, Malcolm X. I think it makes sense. So anyway, anything you guys want to know?
What was there before Revolution Books?
There was like a bunch of different. There was like a bodega. There was a bar, and there was a bunch of like bodegas right across the street over here too. Liberation Books, where I used to go to, and that's the laundromat over here with Una Mozak. Una Mozak was founded Liberation Books, and her husband was we call it not Marine, we call it not Coast Guard, we call it Sunni Maritime. He was one of the first black maritime people, and he was affiliated with the Communist Party and in and out of nationalist circles, but he wrote a book called Star to Steer By, and his wife, Una, founded Liberation Books, and that was a specifically black nationalist bookstore. It had the red, black, and green flags out there, it had the children's books. You go there, and hey brother, what's going on? How can we help you? Used to hang out there, used to go there sometimes, but like I was looking for Pacific books. And that's the thing too. You also have to understand too that when you're doing these things, political projects, you gotta get people around you to carry them on. Because you just can't be by yourself. You know, because that's what happened. She got sick, and the store stayed there. But in reality, people should have just opened the store and just started doing it. You know what I'm saying? But people don't. You know, we don't communicate ideas. We're afraid of stealing ideas. You know what I'm saying? I'm personally myself. I'm just like, I try to talk to as many people as possible because you want to pollinate and influence people, and maybe they can carry out your idea. You know You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you can't be selfish with your ideas, you know? But yeah, but the Revolution books, yeah, they were open. They're newcomers. I remember when they were downtown, 19th Street and 16th Street. And that was more, around that area was more where the socialists were, you know, close to the Communist Party headquarters, 23rd Street, 7th Avenue. The St. Mark's Ballroom, which used to have the May dances, the Socialist Workers Party over in Union Square. Workers' World Party used to be on 15th Street and 7th Avenue. You know, all these places. And I know this place because I used to go to all these places. What's up?
We've been walking up and down and sort of looking at, even since COVID, how Lenox is changing. Do you want to talk about what you're seeing from here at Maysles? I think as it relates to this idea that you're bringing forth of the Black common. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, for me, I mean, the thing what makes Harlem is the fact that, you know, we have a majority consciousness here. And so, you know, Malcolm always said to us, he said, Malcolm was like, you know, don't tell people, don't let people tell you you're a minority, you're a majority. The world is majority people of color.
Right.
And, you know what I'm saying, and in Harlem, the way that was translated was a majority consciousness in terms of folks from the Caribbean coming from majority countries being like, y'all are putting up with this bullshit, like segregation, like what? You know what I'm saying, being outraged, you know? A lot of our leaders are from the Caribbean. And so for me, the Black commune, the Black community, Black communalism, is a spiritual part of like our ideas of our nation building, is that we're people. You know what I'm saying? We're not skin color, we're people. You know? And so the fight that's happened is that Harlem has always been an internal colony attached to this greater white project. And there's always been a fight over those resources and who's going to control those resources. And naming that as self-determination for our people is important because we need these institutions to survive. And so reimagining, for example, where you're from, City College, when it was taken over in 1969 to be renamed Harlem University. You know what I'm saying? And what does that mean in terms of thinking through self-determination in terms of what we need to survive? And not just everybody, because when you rename it Harlem University, let me just be very clear, the Black project for the most part was not a supremacist project. It was an inclusive project. It was a multiracial project with Black majoritarianism. So James Baldwin has this quote. He says, blackness is not the absence of light. It's not the absence of color. It brings all colors in. You know, so the idea is that you have a Black majority that's been inclusive of white folks as well. And that, you know, and so today, from what I see, to go back to your point, you know, Harlem is still an internalized colony, over-policed, because the response of the state to COVID was not what it should have been. What we should have got out of COVID was an expansion of Harlem Hospital, expansion of healthcare, expansion of rent control, expansion of like subsidies. That's what we should have permanently etched in from this disease that killed 1 million people. But instead, we got over-policing, we got Eric Adams and over-policing, right? And instead, we got Eric Adams and over-policing. You see, you know, an explosion of homelessness, evictions, displaced people, you know, deunionization. I'm not mad at Trader Joe's for being there because it's Trader Joe's. I'm fine with fresh foods and stuff being bad. I'm mad at the fact that Trader Joe's decertified their union on 14th Street and brought that bullshit up on 25th Street. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what we got here.
And even like, I live a block over on 127th and 5th.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the restaurants I used to go to over here are gone. And just looking at even like the smoke shops, there's a change in the retail landscape.
It's a change of reason, and this has been happening for years. Out of opportunity zones, this has been accelerated. What's going on? Because when I was growing up, I go back to the bars. The bars were a place of information. The bars were places where you can go meet with people, hang out. You don't see them anymore.
Right.
You don't see like Lenox Lounge over here. That's one example. But John's Recovery Room, the Seville Lounge, all those places we get to be to hang out and do things you don't see anymore. And then so these places get kind of screwed out. So right now, Maysels, which is like, it's funny because it's a little bit of a miracle. There's a miracle on Lenox Avenue because we're an open space. We're primarily a cinema. We're primarily a place that shows documentary filmmaking, but we're known as a community hub as well. You know what I'm saying? And so the cost of entry into space is not how much money you have. You know what I'm saying? It's just your interest and your curiosity. You know what I'm saying? We don't judge you by how much money you have. But if you are millionaires anyway, we'll take your checks. I ain't too proud of bag. I'm an executive director. But yeah. And so, and I think that's the thing too. And I think that's the thing when you talk about the commune plot. How do we create spaces where political participation? And the worst thing about it, I tell you too, Brother Jerome, is what's happened with the Black church in Harlem. And the Black church, the decline of the Black church is so bad. And I tell you this right now, the decline of Black church will even have an impact in terms of like immigrants, because these are places where you can have sanctuary or places where people can go to, and they're closed. A lot of Black churches in Harlem are closing. They're surviving with very little bit because those communities are being shifted out to the Bronx. So yeah.
Thank you so much for all of this. I have another question. I live in West Manhattan.
Right on.
We were also talking a lot about jazz this morning.
Yes.
And sort of jazz as a way, both like the physical infrastructure of Lenox Avenue, having places to listen to jazz, but also sort of pushing folks to like, how do we map the sonic vernacular of Harlem? But also, how do we understand jazz not simply as a music, but a way of Black being? And so I'm really curious if you can help us understand how you see jazz on Lenox Avenue.
Man, that's a hell of a question. That's a good question. I would just say that I'm sorry for just being if I'm a little long-winded. But I gotta answer that question because through Malcolm X.
Right.
So my dad saw Malcolm X on Lenox. He saw him speak. And it'll be a sad day, one day, that's gonna happen when the last person who heard Malcolm X speak in person dies and is no longer on the planet. That would be a sad day. Like, there's a sad day, there's somebody who probably died who was the last person who heard was a Luxembourg's voice.
Right.
We
gotta get all those people on film too.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what Manning's work was supported.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that me and Manning would probably disagree ideologically, but I knew Manning. Manning had a good heart.
Can you explain just Manning Marable?
Yeah, Manning Marable used to teach over here at Columbia University. And he had the Malcolm X Project, and he was interviewing everybody. What he did was he marshaled the resources of Columbia to document Malcolm X. You know what I'm saying? And when he did that was amazing, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're in the university. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you do, you're supposed to leverage your resources in the service of the people. And that could just be making copies. You know what I'm saying? You can do whatever you need to do, but that's what you do. But let me just ask this question real quick, and I'll say this real quick. So Manning was over there, and Manning recorded a bunch of people, like Mary Baraka, people who knew Malcolm X. And so now we have to videotape my dad saw Malcolm X speak, right? You fast forward that 40 years later, 30 years later, or 20 years later, I hear Malcolm on a tape. You know what I'm saying? It's a hip hop tape. It's through KRS-One, and it's through Sonic. And so there's a reverberation that's happening on that. And I'm also listening to Lenox because the people on the 5%ers who are playing the tape, right? And I'm saying to say is that there's a reverberation there. And there's a relationship between Malcolm and jazz, because I think that what Malcolm was able to do was Malcolm was able to improvise. And there's something very specific about Harlem jazz that was really about rebuilding into laboratories. And so the places that people come up to and listen to were places of great experimentation. Bebop was an experimentation that came out of Harlem through Minton's, through the after-hour spots. And it was a way of communicating, of black people communicating with each other, liberation. And then that became the focal point of movement. And so there's gonna be a movie that's coming out called Soundtrack of the Revolution that I hope you guys will come back to Maysles to see.
When is it?
Yeah, thank you. Soundtrack for Coup d'etat that we're doing on Congo and Harlem Week. That I hope you guys will come back to see it, because that film deals with the fact of how Max Roach, Abby Lincoln, Maya Angelou, Rosa Guy, that whole jazz scene went down to the United Nations and protested when Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. And Abby Lincoln and Maya Angelou, you know what Maya Angelou is? You know what Abby Lincoln is? You know what I'm saying? You should know Abby Lincoln was a famous jazz singer. Go home and go to Spotify, Apple Music, look up Abby Lincoln, Abbey, Lincoln. Listen to it tonight. Listen to the album, what's the name of it? Percussion Bittersweet. That's your homework assignment. Listen to Percussion Bittersweet. We Insist, Freedom Now, We Insist. You gotta listen to that stuff. That's your homework assignment for tonight. I don't see y'all write it. I see this one's right. I know she got an A. And the other ones, I don't see, oh, you type it. Okay. Exactly. You need to write, listen to that stuff. That music, and Abby Lincoln, and Maya Angelou, and Rosa Guy were the ones inside the UN chambers throwing the shoes down at the UN. You know what I'm saying? Causing a ruckus. You know what I'm saying? When Patrice Lumumba died. And so then you have a connection between the Congo, what's happening here in Harlem, and what's happening downtown. In the way that Maya Angelou says it was just poetic. It was like, they didn't think it was going to happen. They were like, you can't get black people to come downtown. That was the old stereotype back then. Black people don't leave Harlem. We stay up here. You know what I'm saying? You can't get us to come downtown. They went downtown. They went to the UN. They threw the shoes at the motherfuckers too. They threw the shoes at the representatives. And they showed them what was that. And so there was a connection there. Atlantics, Sonics, right? Solidarity. We communicated with each other. They see that. The black brothers see that. The Cubans see that. You know what I'm saying? Every year the Cubans come, and when they need to give a report, they go to UN, but where did it come to talk to us? They come to Harlem. You know what I'm saying? Fidel Castro met with Malcolm X. And Cuba says, you are a people worthy of international recognition. We're giving you an international report. You know what I'm saying? Venezuelans do it too. But the Cubans did it first. They met it right there in Hotel Teresa. Malcolm, Fidel. Fidel called Malcolm. Malcolm came at night and said, welcome to Harlem. You know, Malcolm never made it to Cuba, but his ideas made it to Cuba. Because Fidel gave autonomy to a lot of the hip hop artists in Cuba. Don't believe what the CIA says.
And then there was a festival in 90-something.
Exactly, a hip hop festival, which I was a real part of. The Black Artist Festivals with the Malcolm X grassroots movement We used to fly people from New York City to go meet Assata Shakur, who was a former Black Panther student at City College. No, she was at PMCI, I'm sorry. She lived in Harlem, part of the Harlem branch. CUNY. Fly to meet Assata, who's in exile right now in Cuba, under protection of the U.S. government, for a frame-up that she's a part of. So all that to say is that there's a connection there, and you're part of a broader community. This goes back to when we were talking about a global majority, not necessarily a minority. Because then you have a connection between that. And so within the context of U.S. imperialism, you know, and the SAG, but they want to kind of clamp it down. So what do? You clamp it down. You cut people's ability to talk. You can't, you know, there's so many spaces that are doing that stuff. But you know, spaces are still there. And the thing about it is, at the end of the day, as long as the people are there, the ideas will always be there as long as the people are there.
And there's something you're saying about, you know, when you were reflecting on jazz, that this spirit migrates and improvisationally through different mediums. So, you know, you see Malcolm speak, you hear a recording of it in some music, you walk into a space that it's changing form in a way, is what you're getting at.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about it is like a lot of times, like we you know what I'm saying, this is a whole other, and I want to talk to you because I know you wrote this Malcolm.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter about music.
It's like, you know what I'm saying, Malcolm Malcolm book. I'm so interested in this. I have my own ideas around Malcolm, and like, I think we're still grappling with Malcolm is. But I think it's part of like that critical tension between being, Malcolm's beauty was he was an internationalist, at the same time he was cosmopolitan. And he was there but not there. You know what I'm saying? And his ability to be able to build into these different spaces and different voices. And again, being polyphonic, not code switching, because there's a difference between being polyphonic and code switching. Being polyphonic is being able to listen to your people and be able to reinterpret when you're listening to your people and manifest that in different voices and tonalities. And so Malcolm had a musicality to him. You know what I'm saying? Richard Pryor was, as a performer, was polyphonic. He can do 15 different presentations of 15 different Black people. And he showed the differences of Black class, right? Because he knew how to listen. Performance. You know, a lot of us, because of the internet, with tinned ear, and you're going back to jazz. Jazz is meant to be listened to live. You have to listen to it live. I used to work in the Village down in Brett Form. I listened to over 7 years working in the Village. I listened to over 300 concerts. And, you know, you listen to live music all the time, you get to learn how to work with people. You get to know how different pitches, tonalities, loudness, silence, you know? You gotta be able to do that. You know what I'm saying? Y'all trying to be teachers? What are you trying to do?
Architects, designers.
Same thing, it has a musicality to it. You know what I'm saying? Everything you have to do has a sound to it. You know what I'm saying? And the thing about it is Black people as a people, we're very smart people. We're not reading people, we read sound up. You know what I'm saying? And so there's a literacy around that.
Can I just say something that I think?
And you can say whatever you want, sister.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All of you get this. This is an open space. I got nothing to do the rest of the day. I love doing this.
I know, I'm supposed to be doing I'm supposed to be going and doing but I'm like about to jump out my freaking seat because this is what I live for. But I think also what's really important, we're pretty early on in the semester in our understanding, but in hearing you speak about Malcolm and jazz and sort of, we're having these really abstract conversations about something, in a sense that also is very concrete. Part of what we're hearing and what we're learning is that we need new modalities to understand and approach the built environment in Harlem. That the sort of normative architectural forms that you've been taught or that history suggests are important are in a sense, they're not irrelevant, but they're so ill-equipped to like really get at the complexity of Black life and of life just generally. And you're saying so, I mean, you're dropping gem after gem, but you're talking about internationalism and Marcus Garvey as being like the historic framework for the Schomburg Center, for Speaker Corner, for Malcolm, for everything, for the jazz music that's emerged. Like Malcolm was a jazz musician, Malcolm played music, Abby Lincoln, Max Roach, early Afro beats at his speeches on Lenox Avenue as a tool, not only to just say, hey, come listen to me, but also to say, this is my vision of a Black diasporic world. You know what I'm saying? So like, that music is a political and also spatial vernacular that helps to create community in a new, geographic imaginary that extends beyond just one particular space. And so I think what I'm trying to have us understand is like, and also even I want to really get at this term of jazz as sort of improvisational. I think sometimes the term improvisation can suggest an informality or that actually doesn't really reflect the deep attention to both like classical musical structure forms, but then also, like we were saying, being able to know, oh, this is the beat, this is what's happening, the other things happening on that block, and that block is hot, and this block got the police, and and the gentrification, and all of that, you have to really know in order to improvise.
Improvisation and high attunement can coexist.
Yes, that it's like a deeply intellectual thing. It's not just, you just jump in, but it's like you gotta know the other, and that's almost like the thing we're talking about, the mapping. Like to know counter mapping, we need to know this history. Like we can't come in, especially for folks who are not from the community, you can't come in and counter map without knowing this political context. So I think it's really important that you're sort of you're spanning all of these worlds, but they come together through the politics, through the music, and then that's how planners, preservationists, architects are able to even begin to respond to the material reality of late stage racial capitalism.
Yeah, and I think there's something there about a re-embodiment of architecture. And this is where there was a moment where it really became clear we have to just get out to this block and just walk it and experience it as bodies and recharge that capacity as, in this case, architects, mappers, surveyors, because there is something different about, there's different modalities that come into play when you do that.
Yeah, like Lenox is what do you call it? What is it maybe Walker said, what I'm saying, Return of Native, vicious modernism, being clash where beauty was made, he has that line, and it is band clash. You know what I'm saying? You hear the guttural, you hear the noise of it, the funk of it, the sweat of it. You know what I'm saying? And there's a restrained violence that's always at play. You know what I'm saying? And there's always real violence, real ass violence. Shit just pops off out of nowhere. And there's a way that your whole entire body language and community language navigates that on a day-to-day level. And it's, it could be maddening because people from Harlem are just different. It's just a different, people from Chicago, me and my girlfriend have a very loud relationship. She's from the South Side, I'm from Uptown. It's a loud relationship. It's really decibel levels. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Because we just talk. And it's just
you've been talking over the ambulances.
Yeah, exactly, for real. You know what I'm saying? Like, talking over trauma. Talking over histories and stuff like that. But it's wild to think about on that level because you grow up in here and you don't necessarily realize it, but I think you do realize it to a certain extent because it's slightly different. And I don't know, you grew up here. Did you have a childhood here? You had a childhood here?
I did not.
I've grown up here since I was 10.
So you know what I'm talking about. You're just a different kid. Like, I don't know, like, when I grew up here in I was born in 76. So I grew up in the 80s in the crack era, but even before then, just like, there's a self-consciousness and awareness of you having this, because also, the thing about it is that when you grow up here, you're also competing with the white world. And just below 110th Street is a completely different world. You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, and I'm talking about when I grew up, Harlem was 99.5%, black, Central Harlem was 90% black, 10% Latino. And then you would just go down 110th Street, completely different from the burnt out buildings and everything we had up here to like fine marbled cities. In fact, I mean, a lot of people don't remember this, and I have to tell you this right now. I remember being in a cab with my mom, the big cabs from the 80s, and I remember being in a cab, and then a map in the back of the cab will only go above, only go to 96th Street. Take care, Nelson. You get well. Yeah. There was no above 96th Street for the cab. Did not exist. This is pre-Uber, pre-call and stuff. You could not get a cab in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? And so the level of racialized segregation and spatial segregation, and that has an impact on you as a child, you either have to take this in two ways. One is that the white world is superior and we're inferior, or B, the world is unjust. And you know, and those of us who took that situation, the world is unjust, I think we came out of that situation much more healthier, because we were able to navigate these spaces and be like, what you have is bullshit. There's some capitalism, you know, before we had the language, you know, there's some capitalist bullshit that's rooted in oppression. But that's what you're challenged with when you're a little kid. You know what I'm saying? Not unlike the little kids who were in South Africa who were fighting against apartheid. And you read their chronicles, and they're like, you know, they were 13, 12, 13 years old fighting for the ANC. Because they had a realization how crazy the world was. And we're still living in that crazy world a lot of times now too. But this thing about it is that what I would say lastly is that the white people are here in Harlem. Y'all are experiencing the over-policing, the overpricing of housing. And then the white folks have to make a choice in terms of like, am I gonna call the police? Or am I gonna get organized? Because the first instance of I'm gonna call the police is a suggestion that of which side you think the problem lays. But there's an offer invitation of getting organized. And I think if people get organized, I think people can get organized together. It could just be like something like this. So like, you know, kind of just like this system we have right now, this needs a little shove. I can't make a promise what comes after it, but it's something to think about. So these built environments you're talking about, these spaces are commune, whatever. I hope you're thinking about that, because we need more spaces like Maysels. We need more spaces like what your Professor Jerome and his sister Nahja is providing, you know, textually through her books and through your presence here. You know what I'm saying? We need spaces of unity and understanding and talking and be able to overcome that stuff. Because, you know, Harlem has a long history. And I never talk about the South Asians of Harlem, you know what I'm saying, which is an equally long history too. You know, Miles Davis and Tume go to an Indian restaurant, and Miles, and they're playing the bongos, and the Tume's like, why'd you bring me here? Miles like, listen, playing the bongos. Next thing you know, they come out with On the Corner, 1973. Listen to that album. As far as I'm concerned, that's the first hip hop album. You know what I'm saying? On the Corner. listening, again, Miles Davis, listening to what's happening on the street, what's going on, what's popping, what's locking.
And he grew up, and he lived in Lenox Terrace for a little while.
Exactly, he was a Harlem boy. Exactly, he lived in Lenox Terrace. See, it all comes back to it. All comes back to Harlem. All comes back to Harlem. So anyway, that was extended solo. When you were asked any more questions, any you curious about?
One question.
What's up, bro?
What do you think the Boulevard needs? When we got to?
What we need? I think, you know what I'm saying? I think the Boulevard needs, immediately, I think we need bike lanes. There's no bike lanes at home. I think we need an expansion of good quality daycare and housing. You know what I'm saying? And I think we need like spaces of meeting and third places of encounter. I think we need more galleries. We need more places to hang out. And then but beyond that, I think we need whatever, what do you think the community needs?
That's what I'm trying to explore. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, but what do you need?
I mean, in my community or in general?
Yeah, your community in general. But I think what you need is probably what I need too. It's not, I think that you look at the asthma rates in this community, you look at like the thing, and I think the thing about it for me is that there's always been this tension between, should we raise Harlem, should we just burn Harlem to the ground? People in the 60s were talking like that. I myself, I think to me, I think it needs to be rebuilt, in a way that represents democratic visioning and people's input, and that make people matter. Sense of the human for a change. And then have the ability for people to have these spontaneous gatherings and give people the space to be able to practice, like you said. So it's not improvisation, it's practice. So that we can become better humans in all spheres of our life. I think that's what it is. I think that there's a bad tendency in this country to create affordable housing very quickly and very cheaply. And not to think about quality, in that sense. And that's all. That's all.
Any other question for Kazembe? Kazembe, this is just wonderful sharing. Move forwards.
I appreciate it.
Any other thoughts? Any other things? Remember, there's no dumb question.
No dumb questions. I know y'all had a long
Mike's
day.
thinking of something over there.
And I'm thinking of how to ask, or like a way to phrase it that makes sense.
This is scary, man. Don't be afraid.
It's not like, well, my map is going to be about, which is about like the sidewalk as an extension of the home, almost like a second living room. But I don't know exactly what I want to ask about it. So you have anything to say about it, I guess that's fine.
We try here. We have a very unusual. We're actually in the process of. You guys are like the third architects I spoke to this week. We're in the process right now of like remapping and looking at the space of Maysels. And one of the things we realize is that we're struggling with like a lot of different businesses on Lenox Avenue with the street, how to interact with the street. And sometimes, our space is really unusual because, the entrance, the extras of the space kind of juts out, and it's like, and there's a small entryway, so sometimes it spills into the street. And I thought about that as a programmer, Like, do I do more programming like in the streets? Like, for example, like, do I have stuff that we play here? Like, do I show a movie like Fresh that has to do with chess, and then have chess tables set outside? You know what I'm saying? Do I have movies about bikes, and then have a bike repair workshop outside? Like, how do I exercise like the best way of thinking about our use of that's one speaking of the block as an autonomous zone that is learning is happening, that gets people to come into the space and interact with the street. And that's the way I'm also thinking about it. So I'm forced to extend ourselves in the street. We also, just a very fact of the matter is that we have a food crisis. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of times, like, we have zero waste policies that, so we end up giving a lot of food to homeless people, an extension to the street. Because we have to do that because they've cut the food stamps, people come here and they're just like straight up hungry. They're not even asking for money for drugs. They're just hungry. So we have to be able to do that. And and this is the place that homeless people recognize as a safe space. We will open our doors. You know what I'm saying? And you will get to have a chance to sit down, use the bathroom or whatever. And so a lot of ways, like being here in Harlem has made us into a social justice hub because we have to react to the streets. And I think that's something that I think is really a good thing, and is a thing that I want to try to keep expanding, in terms of the work. And I'd love to get your ideas around that because, like I said, that's a single point right now where we're trying to figure out how to best use this space. And with that, now we're also the space is also being used also because of the politics. So like April 30th, I stepped out of this fine establishment. I turned, was it south? This way south,
Mm-hmm.
and I see a tank going up west towards Columbia, and they were about to retake that university and City College the same day. Yeah, and so I'm like, holy shit! And you see the realization of colonialism in that moment because that was like a big ass. That the silhouette of this big ass armored vehicle against Lenox Avenue to this day is striking. And so now we have a responsibility to now also be a safe space when people want to have classes here and want to have meetings here. You know what I'm saying? And this is something that, I wasn't planning on it. I didn't say that as my job application. Like I was gonna do that, but history forces you to do stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? You have to open yourselves up to that. And so that's another extension of opening yourself up to the streets. And being polyphonic and listening. Because if I wasn't listening, then you just close the door and it's like, but I feel if you close the door, then the institution dies.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Because you're not responding to the life that's happening. You know what I'm saying? The spirit. You know what I'm saying? You go downtown, you know what I'm saying? There be some dead churches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stacks of money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Stacks of money. But no spirit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? What did Hegel call that? The Geist? The spirit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I studied German onto too. So, that's all I gotta say. What? CUNY all the way, baby. You know what I'm saying? Projects of CUNY. You know what I'm saying? Don't sleep on it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm proud to say that. I go my project and went to CUNY. I'm a good product of that. No shame in my game. So that's all it says. You gotta keep the doors open. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes you also have to be.
You have to be polyphonic.
You gotta be polyphonic and you gotta be discerning too. Because you know what I'm saying? Because the thing about it too is like you just can't let anything. You know what I'm saying? You're a teacher.
Yeah.
You just can't let anything be. Like, you can't be just like playing tennis without a net. You gotta let some shit. You know what I'm saying? You can't be like willy nilly.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? And that's what the black nationalists, black Marxists, communists, people in the streets taught me
Yeah.
how to have an openness, but also have a rigor. You know what I'm saying? And also be like, this some bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And you know, and not be liberal. You know what I'm saying? Because you know what I'm saying? Because I tell a homeless person, you know what? You need to stop. You're going too far. You're like, oh, I feel so sorry. Yeah, I do feel sorry for you, but no. Because we're both human in this situation. You know what I'm saying? And that's not being mean. But it's just like you gotta have a rigor too. You know what I'm saying? You gotta have care in the world. You know what I'm saying? You wanna have your baby look like in your way. You know what I'm saying?
I think that rigor is really important also to this conversation that we're going to turn to later in the semester, and I know probably to stop now, but just around gentrification, because I think that oftentimes conversations around gentrification like exude an intellectual laziness that isn't rigorous, and that's like, oh God, these poor black people must really not want anything. Like, oh man, Whole Foods is terrible. Like, who wants fresh Alaskan salmon? It's like, well, everyone actually, you know? And I think that I just appreciate this point where we can be, and even me, like I was sort of like, you know, alluding, and sometimes I walk down the street angry when I see certain things, and I may, you know, look a certain, it's not because there's no like care or like we can contextualize the situation or the context in which houselessness or like, you know, this just depressing, you know, reality that we're dealing with in this neighborhood, particularly on Lenox Avenue with just drugs that have been infiltrated, and like this is like, you know, COINTELPRO, 60s, 70s, like, you know, U.S. government injecting these neighborhoods with drugs. It's still doing it to this day, very purposefully.
Absolutely.
But part of the rigor in our understanding is being like, well, it's not that we just say no to development, or we say no to sort of like being critical of the ways in which our communities are harming each other and have been harmed, but we have to be able to situate them. And so just like holding this attention to rigor when talking about gentrification, when talking about development, it's not that this is all bad, or that like every time a nice building goes up, we put our hands on our heads and say, oh my God, another one. It's, oh my God, who developed that? And in the absence of, you know, the person who could have developed it, who had this historical analysis and capacity to situate this development, what is lost? And what might be gained when we expand who's a part of the development, who's a part of like, you know, the zoning, the rezoning, the planning. I think that's what's most important. Not just like, oh, you know, Trader Joe's is just all bad. And like, because then it suggests that like poor folk, black and brown folk, working class people, you know, many of the communities from which we all come, don't want these things, or not worthy. Or can't even exist and again, I don't mean to suggest that any of us are even saying that, but I think there's sort of a flattening of the discussion around gentrification that suggests like a simplicity and a crudeness to life here in Harlem that's absolutely antithetical to the reality of any community.
Right.
Exactly.
And you know, the idea, the kind of the development, the development and architectural laziness of assuming or not bothering to think that some of the qualities of this place, that there's a place for that in a new development. That the only possible thing of value is coming from outside this community.
Yeah.
To be imported, you know, as fancy or modern or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's round up. You know what I'm saying? You had me deal with that what we call it, the fancy salmon. I don't eat fish. I love that. I love it. You know. Well, I mean, it's been a joy having you all here today. It's a joy meeting you and you. I hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you.
All right, guys. All right, so guys, thank you so much. Thank you.